Okay, welcome everybody, and a special welcome to Scott Harrower, who is one of our esteemed presenters and workshop tutors at our upcoming MAANZ Symposium Fragments and Flow that is coming up very soon in October in Brisbane, Australia. So we are running this Meet the Presenter series to give our members a little bit of a chance to get to know each of the presenters a little more. And as you know, we have already run Meet the Presenter interviews for our international tutors. And today I am interviewing Scott, and later tonight I will be interviewing Jane Durant. So if you haven't registered for Jane's, you've still got a chance to do so. So these interviews will be published on the MAANZ YouTube channel and accessible via the MAANZ website to everybody who may not be able to be here today. But I'd just like to start by introducing Scott by reading his bio to you. So Scott Harrower established his mosaic practice in 1994, specialising in site-specific works that integrate art and architecture. Drawing on the legacy of Roman stylisation, he creates monumental commissioned works for public, residential and religious organisations that are both enduring and expressive, resilient, yet marked with beauty of time and use. His practice is rooted in a respect for craftsmanship and the handmade, while his storytelling draws inspiration from everyday life, cinema, nostalgia, and both told and untold histories. Scott's works balance elegance and complexity, carrying forward the traditions of master craftsmen into contemporary urban contexts. So I've had a really lovely time getting to know Scott over the past sort of 12 months in the lead up to this symposium and in my role as education officer and workshop coordinator for MAANZ. And I am blown away with the scope and technical excellence of Scott's work. So I'd like to ask Scott 5 questions that really kick off a conversation with Scott, and he has the opportunity to talk to these, and it enables us to get a bit more knowledge about him and his practice. So Scott, the first question: your practice spans many things: large-scale architectural mosaic, sculptural mosaic, stained glass, and more. So can you tell us about your early artistic life and the evolution of your practice towards mosaic as your primary form of visual expression?
Okay, thank you, Caitlin, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's exciting and a bit of an honor to, well, be put into the position of, the masterclass. But look, creatively, when I was 19, I was living in Melbourne and I trained as a visual merchandiser back in the olden days when we were still considered just a window dresser. So by the time I was 24, I'd got a job in Brisbane with a fashion company up there, and I was a visual merchandising manager for a fashion company that had a chain of stores. So what that entailed was, I think it's critical because it actually led me into what I'm now doing. In that role, I had a team of other staff members. We had prop makers, we had an art department, and then I would have meetings with the design team, and they would preview or brief me on up and coming ranges of clothing ranges coming out. And then my role for that was to actually take that story, create a story, and put it into a conceptual way of selling those garments with a theme and a collection of props, and then we would distribute that throughout, the chain. So one day I walked across to, for those of you who might be in Queensland might know, I went across to Queensland Handcrafts to get some materials, and I met the new owner of the company, which was the daughter of the founder, and she had just inherited the business, and she decided that she was going to sell Queensland Handcrafts and focus on her own existing businesses. Anyway, through a conversation, she said that she had a whole range of people who were looking and were interested in doing a mosaic course, but she decided she wasn't going to run with it. And she said, "Why don't you run with that?" And I said, "Well, I've never done mosaics before, etc." So, but what she did was she gave me a list of names, addresses, and phone numbers of people who wanted to learn mosaics. And about a year previously to that, I'd been overseas and I had come back and a little bit disenfranchised with my existing career, and I was looking for what it was that I was supposed to be doing. So when I got the list, I thought it was a very exciting time. I was not quite 27, and I decided that this was the thing that I was meant to be doing. It was like an epiphany for me. So uh, I did some research, read some books, fell in love with Roman antiquity, saw how it was all pieced together. I was fascinated by the tessera, by the square, the individual slight shaping and of a cube, and decided I'm going to make a career out of this. I hired a community centre hall, the Red Hill Paddington Community Centre. I wrote a 4-week beginner course. I advertised it in their newsletter, and the workshop booked out.
And go from
And
there.
I stood up in front of this group of people and taught them how to do mosaics. Whilst I suppose I was also learning myself. But for me at that time, it just felt like I had this absolute synchronicity with Roman antiquity and those early phases of the medium. I was fascinated by the way that it was all put together. And even back then, I thought there are so many different easier ways to tell a story and to create a picture. And I was fascinated by the shaping of the marble in those early times. So after that 4-week course, um, I thought I'll do another one. I was still working in my job with the in the rag trade, still doing that, running the odd mosaic workshop at night, and then I decided I'm just going to run with this. So within the space of several months, I resigned from my job. I moved house, found a space where I could have a large studio space, and I resigned from my job. I said goodbye to my company car, which was a bit of a sacrifice. And on the first day of self-employment, I had decided, well, my mandate or my premise was that I had decided that I was going to specialize in site-specific architectural mosaics in the true heritage of the medium, and then I was in for the long haul. I was several days off turning 27. And on day one, after I left my job, I got a phone call and I got my first commission to do a mosaic in a person's bathroom. They got my phone number from a tile shop, and 32 years later, I'm still going. So
You are
that's how I
indeed.
got
Yeah.
into mosaics. And yeah, I think I've answered that question, haven't I, Caitlin? I'll hand that back
Absolutely.
to you.
Absolutely, Scott. There's so much, you've got so much knowledge to share. So, as you said, day one, you made the commitment. It's large scale architectural mosaics. That's my future. This is my life. It's synchronicity, it's an epiphany. This is what I'm meant to do in this world as a creative person. So, but that's all very, very well and inspirational. But when it comes down to it, when it boils down to it, you're working with huge, large scale works, you're working to a timeline. Uh, it relies on excellent organization and coordination. So I know that in your upcoming masterclass at the symposium, you're planning to share some trade secrets. But can you share some reflections on how you actually approach your studio time in terms of the discipline required to turn up and get to work, and how you navigate the distractions of everyday life when you're on a deadline?
All right. That's a very big question. I'll just throw back to when I was a young person and I decided to create a career out of a very time-consuming, ancient, old-fashioned medium. So I learned very early on that if I wanted to be successful, I needed to spend time in my studio. And one thing I will say is anyone as a creative practitioner that wants to be successful, you need to do the time in the studio. You need to develop your craft. You need to forego some things. And I was prepared to do that because I was impassioned by the medium. All right. So, but now, all of these years on, and over the period of time, bit by bit, I learnt that I always had an assistant. I always, large scale works, it's not just me. So in the symposium, I'll talk a little bit more about a work that we did at Iona College, which was 6.3 meters tall by I think 2.75 something wide. So it's a massive monumental work and it was highly figurative. And I had a team of 6 people, including myself, working on that. So for me to manage my time and that coordination, I think it actually helped with those years in the rag trade, working within a company and learning about time frames that we had a set time that we had to install. So right from the very beginning, I had that grounded training in time frames and time management and working with people and getting things designed, manufactured, produced, and installed. Um, and then as I started, I also did a small business management course. So the idea of business and art can often be um, taboo. But for me, it's been a part of my success. So, timeframes, how do I manage that? Well, I live on a large acreage property in the Byron Bay hinterlands. My purpose-built studio spaces is an easy garden path walk from home. Uh, to get out of here, like my local shop, if I ran out of milk, is 20 minutes drive. So that's 20 to have a chat. That's like an hour's trip. And those things you just plan for and you don't want to go. So, studio time, like managing when I've got a large project, I will divide a piece of work up into timeframes in a way, figuratively and conceptually, right? And then because I've got staff or, workers coming in, I will designate a section or a specific element to what I think that they're probably good at. So what in a way I'm doing, although I'm working on the works as well, but I'm also managing levels of detail, different levels of the design that will require further detail. Some will require less, and I will start a whole piece of work all at once. So if we're working at 6.3 meters high, then I've got somebody working on each different section. All of my works are all fabricated in my studio before being sent out and then installed, right? So we're working off site. So in some ways, I'm managing my time, I'm managing budgets, I'm managing levels of detail, and I'm managing people to work within, I guess, within the mindset that they've been trained by me. That's one of my secrets. I take people on who have never done mosaics and I train them up so that the only way that they know how to do a mosaic is for it to look like my work. And that's one of my little trade secrets. And then I start with a full-scale cartoon, fully colored. They're given creative expression to express themselves. They work, and then at the end of the day, when they all go home, I then review everybody's work and I look and then I make adjustments and changes. And then when they come back in the next day, I'll give them a brief and I'll say, I want to introduce this color, etc., or I want to just redo that line. So it really is about managing not only client expectations, managing time frames, materials, like making sure the construction company or the site is running along time frames within us as well. Um, and I guess the big thing is putting in all of those extra times and all of those hours to meet the deadline. Any great creative person will tell you that you don't start at 9 and you finish at 5, right? And then that's it. You just have to put in the hours. So, one of my great ways of managing all of that is also when I've got projects on and I've got people coming in, once I've got them all going, I then disappear into my office work kitchen and then I cook a hot lunch, just like in an Italian tradition, and I prepare and I set the table and we all sit down and we have a home cooked meal and a glass of wine. And it really is about, just as every piece of tesserae has to look as if it's only one element, but it's so critical to building up and creating that whole picture. That's how I manage my project. I manage every single level of that as a part of a cohesive, connected family. And I find that that gives me the best result. And that's how I meet timeframes and timelines. I surround myself with,
Fantastic.
yeah, that's how
So
I
you've
do it.
got very organized management skills, time management, people management, food management. I'm coming, by the way. I'm going to book in.
I answered the
I'm after,
question, but
I'm looking forward to that glass of wine and home cooked meal. I'll work for free.
well, come on over. There's a project that I'm just designing for now in Perth. So,
That sounds
all
fantastic.
is always open.
Yeah. So on further to that, so and this slide just really demonstrates, the scale of these pieces and the team hard at work, making the work. So just on that though, you've got large scale works and they
Yes.
have large scale budgets. But what comes with a large scale budget is a large scale expectation to deliver to a timeline, but also to endure. We've got to endure the harsh Australian climate. It's got to stand the
Mhm.
test of time, both in the subject matter, the design, the narrative, and the construction of the work. So, what importance do you place on technical competence in Mosaic? And what advice would you have for those who may be considering taking on a larger commission like this in terms of their preparation?
Okay, that's another big question. Thanks. That's okay. My key that I learnt for years and years and years ago was I always design and I always fabricate for full water immersion. I don't mind, I don't care if I'm designing a piece that's an interior or that it's undercover or it's inside a building. I treated it as if what would happen if it was fully immersed in water in a swimming pool. And from that basis, I choose my adhesives, I choose my materials. I will say that, I'm at that stage where I'm doing a lot more kind of like commission works for independent Catholic colleges. And I'm lucky because I've convinced them that, the material of choice is Orsoni Venetian Smalti. So I get to work with some of the best and most luxurious materials because it also ties in with their heritage. So when we're talking about technical importance and all of those other things, as a designer or someone who's starting out, One thing I would part for longevity and time is the work must look as though it belongs in its architectural setting. So site specificity is basically designing for the site. So you're looking at all of those other architectural elements, not only the brief that the client will bring to you, like we've just done a piece for a 60th anniversary of the establishment of a college. So that had a story to tell, but it also had to be there for another 60 years. All right, so technical importance, I'm looking at material, I'm looking at fabrication techniques, and I will just look, I'm going to slightly segue, but this is one of my things. I notice a lot of contemporary works and people who aren't working at the same level as I am because they've got the liberty and the freedom to express themselves without a client's criteria. But I look at my approach to mosaics is the first step that I do of technical competence is I establish the design. I'm working with my client, I'm getting a brief. Like this project that I'm just designing for now, I consulted with a group of students who are boarders. So I'm designing a piece of work for to celebrate the 60th anniversary of a boarding college. So I want to hear those stories from the students. What is it like that you're no longer at home, but you have to come together as a part of a community, and then you create like a family identity away from home. So I want to know all of those stories. So when I design, I'm in the design phase, and that's one technical competence or excellence, if you like. And then what I'm doing is I'm just creating the work. All right. So I work using, a paper face indirect technique. That gives me the greatest freedom. I find that I can replace, remove, change, and adapt the work as I'm making it because well, my workers and myself were only temporarily adhering. So the next day, I've only got to deal with, say, cellulose paste to remove, not a permanent adhesive. So when I'm 100% happy, I then approach the fabrication technique. So I'm breaking my step down into three phases. I'm not working directly where I'm trying to do technical brilliance and also thinking of longevity and adhesion. So for me, that's how I deal with that on a larger thing. And if I can just finish on this question, I don't know if anyone's in Brisbane, but as far as talking about being a part of something or being lasting the test of time, some of that really does come in design. Everything will date. Everything will be categorized in an era because we as artists are influenced by the everyday, our contemporary society, what we're experiencing, and that can be reflected within our design. But back in, I think it was in about 2000, I was commissioned by the Queensland State Government to create a piece of work at Roma Street Parklands, in which is about a 17 hectares of inner city parkland in Brisbane. So I was asked to do a map. Right, uh, I was asked to do a map, but I'll just read you what I did. Right, and I think it personifies how I approach something uh, to last the distance of time. All right. On the wall on the lookout, oh, I better put my glasses on so I can see. On the wall of the lookout building is a mosaic illustration of the entire site, as seen from the point where the viewer is standing. The colours of this work were chosen to match closely the colours of the actual landscape, but also to recreate the look of an early mosaic fragment or an old chart with irregular edges. Areas of the mosaic are deliberately left unfinished to highlight this. The mosaic playfully implies that the park is a long-established part of Brisbane and that the panorama currently before the viewer has been there far longer than it really has. So I was just asked to create a map. I decided to do a three-dimensional aerial overview of the parkland before the parkland was built. So I was working off landscape architects' designs. I was standing at a lookout so that when you look at the map of the mosaic and you stand at the lookout, you're looking at the same view. And I think that has, for the viewer, it has an element of surprise and intrigue where you can go, you are here, and the view of the mosaic matches the view of the landscape of the viewer. So it's about tricks and understanding how to inspire, your audience.
Fantastic, Scott. Thank you for that. I'm sure we'll hear more about that in perhaps your Petra Kucha presentation or in your masterclass at the symposium event. So my next question is around your own artistic practice. And as a working on a commission basis, you really need to be a conduit, connecting the ideas of the client to the messages conveyed in the artwork. But how do you balance all that with your own creative voice? And how do you find time for your own personal artistic practice? Do you have a personal artistic practice outside commission work? And what shape does that take? Do you make things for yourself, for your property, for your home, or are you solely working in commissions? Or do you do something else like an interpretive dance or yoga? What do you do?
Well, I have a pair of poorly used tap dancing shoes because I've always wanted to tap dance. So sometimes I just put those on and, you know, tap dance around the studio. But look, that's a really, really kind of like big question because I established my mosaic career as a commission-based artist. All right. So I'd already locked myself in because I saw other artists, friends, painting and painting and painting and creating and then having an exhibition and hoping that it would sell or they'd make a sale. And I didn't want to do that. So I locked myself in early that this was my livelihood. This is how mosaics have been commissioned. They've always been commissioned. It suited my mindset and my framework. And how do I juggle that? Well, I see my role and I'm totally 100% comfortable in that my role as a commission-based artist is to tell somebody else's story, to tell another story. And I'm comfortable with that. There's a great sense of freedom and, is it freedom? I don't know. I feel it's a great sense of gratitude when a client comes to me and says, because I'm chosen, basically, clients come to me and say, we want a mosaic for this, right? So I've got to that point where, the clients are coming to me because of who I am and the works that I've done, and they've seen my works, and I don't have to try to sell them a piece of mosaic, right? So what comes is this, they're commissioning me. So, um, so they want my insight into the medium. They want me to tell their story. So I'm very lucky in that sense. So somewhere along the line, I decided to start to tell my story. And I'll just share lightly on this. I'm very big on the notion of an aesthetic emotion. A piece of work really should have an emotional quality that makes your audience be moved by the work, even if they don't know what it is that's moving them, but they should feel something. And I think the way that you do that, the way to be a great artist to do that is to actually know yourself, to unpackage your own life, your own story, to go to those dark edges where we all want to hide something and to turn the light on and to expose elements of yourself and your journey so that you become comfortable And then what that does is well, it certainly has for me. I'm very open with my lived experience of what I've gone through. I've created bodies of work around my own lived experience and had solo exhibitions that are completely outside of mosaics, but are installational works around. I'll just say in 2015, I created a body of work at a regional gallery in dialogue with the Royal Commission into institutional response of child sexual abuse. Right? I'm very comfortable with that because it's one of those things that has enabled me to set myself free and to also, as a commissioned artist, I'm prepared to ask people the difficult stories and to get people to open up so that the work that I'm creating actually speaks to them so that they see themselves. And I'm talking, it might be an entire school, right? So when I'm not doing all of those things, um, I'm working in my garden, right? I'm I love collecting bush rocks, right? I go down into my rainforest, you know, and I collect rocks and then I do dry stone walls. Um, I've done major acreages of plantings of gardens. Um, And I'm now feeling that I'm going to buy a kiln and start doing ceramics, right? Just
Excellent
to
idea.
shift things along a little bit in another direction. I'm at that exploring stage of making other things,
Hmm.
around myself. I will just say on this, I have one mosaic in my house. I can't even afford my own medium, right? I have a small Roman mosaic of Dionysus on a floor, you know, as a in an interstitial space when I built a new house a few years back. Other than that, it's what I do for work. I want to go off and do something else,
Yeah,
right?
fair
And
enough.
it's generally outside in the garden, planting, propagating, landscaping and creating in the natural environment.
Thank you. That sounds fabulous. So let's get to the next question, which is around your upcoming workshop. So at the upcoming Fragments and Flow Symposium, which is just around the corner in October, which will be held in Brisbane,
Yeah.
Queensland, Australia, you're presenting a professional development masterclass on the Sunday morning of the 11th of October, titled The Art of Storytelling. And can you tell us a bit more about what participants can expect from this half-day workshop and who it might be suitable for?
Okay, well, I think it's definitely suitable for those people that want to actually raise the bar in their own practice, that might be wanting to take on commissioned works, who may be afraid or don't know where or how to go about that. So, but I think it's also open to people that just want to stretch their own creative practice. The art of storytelling can be for a commission, or it can also be just knowing how to use metaphors, color, line, undermento, and different design elements just to improve your own work. But I will say it is focused on that professional edge. So I'm going to structure the workshop around an imagined commission. All right. So we'll all be working uh, in in a group, but also semi-individually around a design brief that I'm going to create that will be cryptic and unusual and will stretch the participants to actually dig deep and understand um, the processes that I go through in order to tell a story and to tell somebody else's story. So we'll look at how do you get, if a client doesn't have a design brief, and often they don't, sometimes they do. A lot of public works that I've done have, but Where I'm at now, they don't. So I have to actually write the brief. And then, so we'll talk about the questions that you need to ask, the things that you will go through to create that to understand what you need to design. We'll then do some hands-on exercises around different design tricks on how to put an image or a story together in a cohesive framework so that it's got flow and tells a story and a person's able to read that story, even if it's not fully laid out, like it will create questionings, right? There's always lots of different multitudes of ways that a person might actually read a story. So we'll go through some of those things. What else have I said that we're going to do? And basically, you will be stretched beyond compare. Where what I like to do, if I've only got you for 3.5 hours, and if that's the only time that I ever meet somebody, then I'm going to try to download as much information that I possibly can into them. I want people to see themselves as like a computer chip that's actually being programmed. And even if people start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, what will happen in those quiet moments within your studio, something will come up and that information will actually be there, even if you don't fully understand it. Because if we never ever hear something, we'll never know. But I like to deliver a lot of information so that it sparks people's own creative energy in their brains off so that they start to feel totally inspired. So one thing I'll just say, even when I was running a beginner classes, my beginner classes were always at an intermediate level because I thought, like I said, if you only ever do one 4-week workshop with me, then you're going to learn about undermento, the importance of the interstice. You're going to learn about shaping of the tesserae. You're going to learn everything to set yourself up to explore. So that's how I try to, or I like to teach. So within this masterclass, I'll be doing the same, but we're doing it in a theoretical framework around, I suppose, design, storytelling. I'm also going to cover some things around contract law. I don't do a commission without a signed contract. So we'll look at those simple things. And they are simple. They're just a safe, easy agreement so that everybody's on the same page. And I just suppose I want to debunk the myth that commissions that you don't have control in a commission. Basically, a commission-based artist has a great deal of creative control over the narrative because the client is coming to you because they like what you do. So I'll just finish on this. A great thing that we're also going to cover is finding your own voice. All right. So once you know what your voice is, once you know who you are, once you know how you want to express, then you can start to work around brand. I don't like the term branding, but you'll actually develop your style of mosaics around that. So we'll look at how a person's style of mosaics and their approach can be married up with a professional practice, and how those two can work together, mutually so that a person flourishes. That's pretty all much it.
It sounds fabulous. And I will be your assistant in that workshop, Scott. So I'm
Oh, great.
looking forward to it. Every one of our workshops either has one or two assistants. Yours also has a larger availability because it's more of a masterclass lecture. So there are a number of places still available in that workshop, which can be booked via the MAANZ website. So have a look there. But I would like to finish today, Scott, by playing this short video that you have sent through. I love it because it just shows you actually making and building this stained
Oh
glass.
yes, I'm making stained glass. Can I just tell you on this?
Yes.
I learned how to do stained glass because I'd never done it, a painted stained glass. Because the client asked if I did stained glass, and I said, yeah, sure. I went onto YouTube. I learned some techniques. I bought a glass kiln, and then and I've done a couple of traditional painted stained glass. So when you know how to be brave, you know that you can do anything. So yeah, this was what you're going to show. This was for a 50th anniversary of a chapel at Iona College in Brisbane.
Okay, this is a short video. It's only 1 minute and 24 seconds, and then we'll come back and close our interview. So here we go.
What's that saying? What doesn't destroy you makes you stronger. It's really important to understand our inner journey. When we see other people in the world, like it's very easy in a fractured society to be judgmental or to criticize or to not actually identify with other people. But we also have to ask, well, what's their journey? What have they been through in order to make them who they are today? Art has been something that's always been integral to me as a child. My journey has been confronting. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. Look, I'm quite open about that because silence helps nobody. You know, we all have to go through this inner journey to unpackage what has been presented to us, and those things are, you know, they're the things that make us. So I try to combine that inner journey or that understanding that a person goes through in order to become a strong individual and to have control over themselves and to have agency over their life. If any of the artwork that I ever create, if it gives a child, a student, an opportunity to see themselves, to feel acknowledged, and to ask the question, who am I? Then I think my role as an artist is done. Yeah. Even if you're an
It was short, but I think it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into your studio. And so thank you so much, Scott, for joining me today and for talking to me and sharing this with our members more broadly. And it just gives everybody a little bit more insight into you, who you are as a person and as an artist, and what they may expect to experience in your symposium workshop. So we'll close here. Now, as I mentioned, this recording will be published on the MAANZ YouTube channel within the day or so, so you will get a reminder email about that. And I hope you all enjoy your Sunday. And huge thanks to Scott. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you very soon in Brisbane for our Fragments and Flow Symposium. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for listening. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.